Артем.
Привіт, мене чути?
Артем, привіт. Ти чуєш нас? Все окей?
Так, я вас чую, все добре. Добре
Супер, ми
чути.
тебе теж чуємо. Дякую, що доєднався. Зараз будемо починати тоді.
Гражданка залишилася.
So, hello everyone. We will start our event almost on time. Thank you so much for joining us here. The next hour we will have a really intense discussion and a really intense panel. And I hope that everyone will find answers on the questions they are having about the current situation now we are having on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and what was going on with the Kakhovka Dam. So the name of our event is War versus Environment, Protecting Dams and Nuclear Power Plants. And this event focuses on global impacts of armed conflicts through the prism of lessons from the Russian war against Ukraine. And you know that one of the most critical problems in the issue of protecting this kind of installations and this kind of projects are also international law and its enforcement. So, however, there is people and countries has to protect installations like this, but still it doesn't work. So the international humanitarian law is quite out of the league. And we see that the Russian occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the destruction of the dam of the Kakhovka plant have demonstrated that like an armed conflict perceived by somebody as local have really, really big and international impacts. So the war has told us that Russians use both as a weapon now, and they are terrorizing not only the people captured in the Zaporizhzhia power plant, but also the country of Ukraine and also the whole world. And today we will be focusing on this both part mostly. So the neglection of the international legislation about protection of such risk objects and the dangers that war brings to energy infrastructure facilities. But on the other hand, this is the first time we are talking really widely about environment in war issues. So maybe this will be also a possibility for us to find some solutions how we can learn from this pretty horrible situation. And I will present now our panelists and we will go into more details. So we will have with us Yordanka Rodica-Yordanov, the Minister of Environment of Moldova. Thank you for being here. We have Martin Kaiser, the head of international climate politics in Greenpeace. We have Artem Kolesnik, energy policy specialist, center from of the environmental initiatives Eco Action, joining us online. He will be appearing on the screen during his speech later on. We have Dmitro Koval, legal director of Truth Hounds organization, consultant and project at Petty Justice, and Nick Yurlov, senior legal counsel, Truth Hounds. And we will start with a small introduction video about the situation on the nuclear power plant. So as you understood from the video, we will be combining today two topics. We will be talking about the right of nature and environmental protection, but also human rights, because without human rights, there is no nature protection, and without nature protection, that can be no good execution of the human rights protection. And since March 2022, the Kakhovka power, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was occupied by the Russians, and now it's belonging to Rosatom, kind of. And it's poorly managed. They are happening really terrible things to nature and also to the people working there. And still, Rosatom is not under sanctions, using nuclear diplomacy and also claiming that nuclear power is circular. And my first question will be to Martin. So I know that Greenpeace is working in this field really for a long time. There's even a mission of Greenpeace to Ukraine to see what is going on. And maybe you can emphasize more on the situation and on what is Rosatom doing and how you see this from your point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. And dear Minister, colleagues and friends, I'm really honored to be here and speak today, coming from a country like Germany, which has phased out nuclear on April 30th this year. You can imagine that the accident in 1986 has highly influenced this debate in Germany and led finally to the phase out of nuclear in our country. And we, since the beginning of the war, we have been deeply concerned about the threat of nuclear safety and security in the Ukraine, and especially the nuclear power plants. And Greenpeace is doing work with our colleagues in the Ukraine, which commenced the work of Truth Hounds in documenting human rights violations inflicted to the environment. And what you can see on the next slide, I mean, you know that I think that the Russian military deliberately and strategically targeted Chernobyl, Zaporizhzhia, and the South Ukraine nuclear power stations. And from day one of this, Rosatom, the state nuclear corporation, has been actively involved in these operations. And also, I think the occupation of Chernobyl ended after 5 days. I think it's now day 650 since Rosatom and the Russian armed forces began the illegal occupation of Zaporizhzhia. And on the next slide, you see that basically today, the specter of the military-induced second Chernobyl disaster hangs over Ukraine and Europe. Even with all 6 reactors at Zaporizhzhia shut down, there's a major risk with real possibility and deliberate destruction of Russian forces and Rosatom of critical safety infrastructure at the plant. And since March 22, I think 8 occasions, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant has been cut off from the Ukraine electric grid and depends on unreliable emergency diesel generators to power the cooling pumps. And this, I think, is one of the biggest risks actually hanging over Ukraine, but also over Europe. And what you can see on the next slide, so we had a mission with the team, an international team with our colleagues from the Ukraine, and I think together with the NGO Save Dnipro, that we expanded a number of radiation detectors, which you can see on the bottom left. And so we distributed those all over the South Ukraine as additional information and sources for radiation in the background, and also as a kind of warning system, early warning system, which we can detect. And I mean, what we found out that the Russian war of aggression has already contaminated and massively damaged the environment in the Ukraine. And Greenpeace Central and Eastern Europe and EcoAction has presented a digital map showing the most drastic cases. Yeah, on the next slide, you can see that both the international and national levels the discussion about criminalization of environmental destruction is intensifying. And even though existing standards, such as the first additional protocol of the Geneva Convention and the Rome Statute, potentially prohibit damage to the environment during war, these standards could not be applied in recent decades. And there's now a new offense of ecocide currently being discussed as another crime in the Rome Statutes. And the widely used of the definition of independent expert panel for legal definition of ecocide from 21 offers an opportunity to realize the prosecution and serious environmental crimes. And in particular, interesting here is that acts could be prosecuted under international criminal law that led to massive damage and destruction of the ecosystems and thus to serious damage to nature in times of war, as well as in times of peace. So today, you might know this is a day of international human rights, and therefore it's important to acknowledge the historic recognition of the United Nations that everyone, everywhere, has the right to live in a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And the resolution of the Human Rights Council in 21 and the General Assembly of the United Nations in 22 add this fundamental human rights to the library of the international recognized human rights. So Rosatom and the Russian armed forces, by their actions occupying Chernobyl and Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, have completed disregard for these human rights. And what you can see on the next slide, and my last slide, is that the role of Rosatom also at the Conference of Parties here. It's an enabler of the attacks and seizure of Chernobyl and Zaporizhzhia plants, and on the other hand is promoting this technology in cooperation with its European and global partners here in Dubai. The international community needs to wake up to the warnings from the government of the Ukraine of the very real possibility of nuclear disasters in Ukraine, which will be the result of a deliberate Rosatom and Russian action. And by doing so, I think they are building new Rosatom reactors in Hungary, in Turkey, and around the world, trading uranium and nuclear fuel, even to the European Union, which has put embargoes on coal, oil, and gas from Russia. So on the next slide, you can see, or the slide before, you can see it has something to do with corporations in Europe, like Siemens Energy and France Framatome. And it's in contradiction of the comprehensive European Union sanctions. And that's what we, together with our partners here, want to push for, that we get sanctions on Rosatom, on the uranium exported to other countries, and the stop of nuclear power as a so-called solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martin, for your presentation. That was really crucial to know how also the international partners stand to this, and also thank you for the help, because you know in Ukraine the civil society is really powerful, and we are trying to help also ourselves but also the government. And for example, Save Dnipro had a really big project, and they now informing more, like I think 5 million people in Ukraine through messengers about the situation with the air pollution. So and this other possibilities instruments are really cool to have them and to broaden the network, already existing network. And now we will go to our speaker online. I will ask Anton Kolesnik to join in now, and he will be talking about the current situation or what is going on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and he will be sharing the current situation with us.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
And also ask, what about my presentation?
You can share your screen.
Okay. 1 second. Yes. Sorry, something goes wrong. Maybe I'll start without my presentation. It's just 4 slides. I can speak without my presentation. Okay, probably I start with the obvious. No nuclear power plant in the world is designed to be in the center of the military operation. The protective shell that have NNP of the facility is not designed to withstand the impact of wireless used missiles, such as we know Kalibr, what Russian used. The fall of one of these missiles, even at the distance of 15 meters or less from the reactors, can generate a shockdown pressure, excluding the design in limit of protector shell. Also, the station operation, which pressurized water reactor of the VVR 1000 type, the destruction of which lead to depressurizing, releasing accumulate radioactive substances into the environment along with water. Probably currently 5 of the 6 units of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant are in such as we call cold shutdown mode. This is state where the nuclear reactor is shut down at low pressure and low temperature of the cooling water. What does mean? During the cold shutdown, the nuclear reactor does not generate electricity. In this state, the reactor can remain for an expanded period, connected to power and has water. As the power block requires electricity and cooling to operate all its systems and mechanisms. Also, in this cold shutdown state, the power blocks in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has a much larger time receiver during which personnel can address any emergency situation and prevent some severe damage to the reactor's active zone. However, it's also important, one of the reactors on this state, it always in hot mode or hot standby. What does mean? The reactor in hot standby can be brought back into the operation relatively quickly. And also, what does this mean? It implies the production of fresh fission products, the release of ion, and generally more energy from this reactor in case of an emergency situation. Also, we have another dangers are associated with the storage of nuclear waste. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is the only nuclear plant in Ukraine which a dry storage facility for spent nuclear fuels, as such as SNF. The SNF storage is not designed as robustly as protective structure about active reactors. In this year, it contained 174 containers, which 24 assembly of SFNS in each. The destruction of these containers will lead radioactive contamination in environment, including the water of the Dnipro rivers. Additionally, risk of the damage are created by the placement Russian military system and other weapon on the territory of nuclear power plant. Mines and ammunition are stored in close to proximity of the power units, as we know. Everything includes that occupies have turned the Zaporizhia nuclear power plants into a military base. About 5,000 armed Russians are constantly stationed at the station. Military equipment in the machine rooms, missile complex, anti-aircraft installation, machine gun nest of the roofs of the reactors compartments, and checkpoints between power units are located on the territory. Military equipment, weapon, and explosive are directly housed in the turbine components of the power units. The situation remains constantly perilous, especially signs of the destruction of the Kakhovska hydroelectric power station, making it challenging to mine the necessary water supplies for cooling. Additionally, a connection to the power grids is assigned for obtained this water, as known as Russian have replaced destruct it. And also, maybe that's all, because I have less time. Then thank you to your attention. And I really want to say, I can only hope that our efforts to remind the world of the potential threat it was unlimited to be heard of all world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for explaining the situation, what is going on now. If somebody wants to have the presentation of Anton, you can approach me later and I will send it to you. And now we are continuing with the topic of atomic energy, kind of, but from a human rights perspective. And I will ask our next speaker, which is Mykola Yurlov, talk more about the findings which are published in this publication. You can access it there. There are still some printed copies. The publication name is In a Nuclear Prison, How Rosatom Turned Europe's Largest Nuclear Power Plant into a Torture Chamber, and How Can the World Stop It? So he will be talking more from the law perspective, but I have only like one thing emphasized about the publication itself. So the present ecological NGOs, environmental NGOs on this panel doesn't agree on few statements that were made in the publication on nuclear energy. We are not agreeing that nuclear energy is crucial and safe for the environment. But the other part of the publications, we are agreeing with it.
Thank you, Diana. Dear colleagues, my name is Mykola Yurlov. I'm a senior legal counsel at Truth Hounds. We are a human rights organization. We do not normally deal with climate issues. We have been documenting international crimes that have been committed on the territory of Ukraine since the start of the Russian war against Ukraine in 2014. But this time, when we started receiving information about what is going on at Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and when we have uncovered Rosatom's direct participation in the atrocities committed at the power plant, we felt that we have an obligation to warn you, all of you, before you start dealing with this company. And it is especially hypocritical that this company has its own pavilion here at COP28 in Dubai. And it is especially sad for us to see that companies such as DP World enter into new contracts with this company, which is known for its atrocities. What the point of our presentation right now is to shed the light, and next slide please, on what is really going on in Enerhodar under Rosatom's control and management. Next slide please. So a very brief overview about what is this object. Regardless of the opinion that you have on the nuclear energy, we're not experts in nuclear energy, so we won't comment on this. We still understand that it is perceived as an important element in energy infrastructure and energy security. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is Europe's largest nuclear power plant, which has been providing electricity not only for millions of Ukrainians, but also to households throughout Hungary, Poland, Moldova, Romania, Slovakia, and Belarus. And now this power plant has been, next slide, please, overtaken, captured, basically from the first weeks of the full-scale invasion. So by 4th of March, the Russian occupying forces have stormed and captured Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And within a week, at least no later than a week, we already have verified reports of Rosatom personnel being present on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Almost immediately from the day that they arrive, torture chambers are being set up throughout Enerhodar, and the personnel of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is being sent en masse to these chambers. We have reports that more than 1,000 people have been through these chambers. We are working to verify them. We've been through more than a dozen of witness testimonies. We've received photographs and videos and direct testimonies, which we were able to corroborate about how are Ukrainians tortured in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Next slide, please. So I will not, due to the constraints of time, go into graphic details or what specifically is going on. You can read some of the selected witness statements in the report, which you can either download or receive a printed publication. But the types of tortures that we have established are being conducted on Ukrainians right now, as we sit here and as we speak, are the following. People are beaten very severely with hands and batons. People are subjected to electric shocks from a military field phone and other equipment. People are suffocated and strangulated. Sometimes their heads are put in bags with fuel, so they drink fuel and suffocate on it. People are passed through mock executions when there is a blank round which is shot next to the head of the person. Or, as in this graphic depiction, people are being forced to dig their own graves. Just imagine this, the inhuman nature of this treatment, as well as being held in overcrowded small cells without access to food, fresh air, sanitation, or water, unless their relatives bring them, and being subjected to threats of sexual violence, such as rape. Next slide, please. So these are the conditions that Ukrainians are living through in many occupied territories. Next slide, please. And in this specific territory, we are speaking about a nuclear object, something which is specifically protected and has additional responsibility because of the power, the dangerous power which is contained in this object. Our evidence is corroborated by investigations of international media such as Wall Street Journal, and we're working right now to process this evidence and pass on it to the law enforcement for appropriate legal action. Next slide. So why does it matter what is going on? What is the legal evaluation? Apart from the fact that it is a war crime under the Rome Statute, a violation of international law of armed conflicts and international criminal law, apart from the fact that it may also constitute crime against humanity because of the widespread nature of these attacks, we also understand that Rosatom, which is directly, as we explain their direct link, how they are participating in these tortures, Rosatom has signed United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and General Principles 11 to 13 of these guiding principles provide direct obligations to refrain from such type of conduct and immediately investigate it. So any company for whom the United Nations guiding principles of business and human rights matter and have any value, any company must review and reconsider their cooperation with Rosatom. But not only that, we also understand that Rosatom, which is now selling its nuclear solutions, is vehemently violating the fundamental rules of international nuclear safety law, in particular, Article 12 of the Convention on Nuclear Safety, because torturing personnel of the nuclear station is evidently a serious safety limitation on that station. And moreover, it may also be considered as an act of sabotage in accordance to Article 2.8 of the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials. And there's a specific standard by the International Atomic Energy Agency on leadership and management for safety, which is obviously also breached in this case. Next slide, please. So why do we stand before you today? We call, first of all, upon Rosatom and the Russian Federation to comply with this decision, with the resolution of the International Atomic Energy Agency adopted on their General Conference just this September. Next slide, please. Which calls for the urgent withdrawal of all unauthorized military and other unauthorized personnel from Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and for the plant to be immediately returned to the full control of the competent inspectorate of Ukraine. Because as you understand from international nuclear safety regulations, only the licensed party can operate the power plant. And Rosatom obviously does not have the license to operate the illegally occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Next slide. Moreover, and this is our call to the world, our call to the civil societies, to decision makers and regulators, you cannot allow this to happen to your own people, can you? In this regard, we call you to take immediate measures for as long as the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant remains occupied, to sanction Rosatom, to exclude Rosatom from any international cooperation, impede access to any imports, and close Rosatom offices abroad, as well as expel it from the United Nations Global Compact. A company which is established to be committing atrocities on such a scale cannot have its place among the civilized people. Final slide, please. And for the companies who are interacting with it right now, all around the world, and we understand Rosatom's presence is truly global, we believe that it is your moral obligation as well, if you are about upholding human rights, to terminate any cooperation with the company which has bloodied its hands in the deaths and suffering of innocent people who were just living in Enerhodar and operating the nuclear power plant, providing energy, not just for Ukraine, but for all the neighboring countries as well. We have very direct and concrete measures which the companies may adopt right now if they don't want to be complicit as well in these atrocities. With that, I conclude my submissions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mykola, for sharing this. It was emotional, but still really right on the point. If you want to deepen into these findings, you can read everything and much more in the document, and we will continue. So we will close the first part of our panel, and we will proceed with another disaster, with the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. So first, we will watch a video. Yes, so there is already a lot to take in, but I will give some information for the start. So the Kakhovka Dam was destroyed on June 6th, and there were a lot of concerns. One among them was how it will affect the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and there are some linkage also. So about the consequences we are facing now and will face in the future. So they are physical damage of habitats of people and of animals. There are also issues about the water quality because a lot of chemicals, biological and physical pollution is now in the water and will be staying there for a long time. This is the other problem is desalination of the Black Sea that we will see the causes another decades. The other problem, also like a large problem, is the landmines who, because of the water, are flooding around, and it's really high risk to go into the water and also to be on the territories which was flooded previously. And 48 settlements were also flooded totally. And some of them are on the occupied territory, some of them are on the Ukrainian territory, which is under the control of our government. And you know that people from the side of Ukraine got help, but from the other side, unfortunately, they are still suffering a lot. And the International Criminal Court has been investigating the dam collapse, and this can be really transformed into a big case. And on this note, I will pass on to Dmytro Koval, and he will be talking about legal issues. So
thank you, Diana, for passing me the floor. So the video that we've watched just now vividly demonstrated the consequences of the Kakhovka explosion on the private and public property and the life of people in general. But what this video didn't and couldn't probably show in much details is how the Kakhovka explosion impacted the environment and climate. So what I'm going to do during the next 7 to 8 minutes is to show you some of the examples of this influence, and also to speak about the legal side of the story and to give you the legal classification of this attack, how from the international humanitarian law and international criminal law this might be described. My presentation will follow the lines of the report that two organizations that I represent is preparing now. That report would reflect on the consequences of the Kakhovka explosion on the environment and will give the legal classification to that catastrophe. So we go to the next slide? I will start with briefly recounting a couple of facts that speak about the importance of hydroelectric power plants for energy mix and also for Ukraine specifically. So first of all, we all know that one of the SDGs is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy. The definition of these adjectives would depend on the historic and geographical context. For Ukraine, these adjectives means the reliance on hydropower, at least in the nearest future. The hydropower was also urged to be included into the global energy mix and climate policy by the International Energy Agency. And again, for Ukraine, it has even more significance since Ukrainian hydroelectric power plants were built more than 20 years ago. For instance, Kakhovka was constructed in 1954, so almost 70 years ago. And definitely this means that it's much more eco-friendly and climate-friendly than traditional energy stations. Maybe even a more significant factor would be, speaking about the importance of hydroelectric power plants, would be that those plants are high maneuver units, which means that they may balance the unpredictable output of electricity that is produced by wind and solar power stations. Can you move to the next slide, please? On this slide, you see very unconventional mathematics in the down part of the slide. And this mathematics basically represents the Ukrainian commitment regarding the renewable energy made in the context of Paris Accords. So basically what Ukraine aspires to achieve is to produce much more renewable energy than it is being producing now. And for that reason, we need the balancing capacity, including the capacities of hydroelectric power plants. Of course, with the destruction of Kakhovka, it will be much harder to achieve. Of course, again, some ingenious and innovative solutions will be found. But for now, we can definitely say that the destruction of Kakhovka power plant impedes Ukrainian plans to achieve more climate-friendly electricity producing. We can go to the next slide. So when it comes to the consequences for environment, probably the one and major factor, or the factor that is the most widespread and long-term that we established for now, is the so-called domino effect of the disappearance of Kakhovka reservoir on the groundwater resources. So just to give you an comparison what the loss of these resources means for Ukraine, the water that was kept in the Kakhovka reservoir, also groundwater around Kakhovka, amounts to 1/4 of Ukraine's entire water supply system. So it's a huge loss and irreversible loss. According to hydrogeologists that we consulted with, even if we hypothetically restore the Kakhovka reservoir right now, we'll need something around 33.5 years to get these groundwater resources back. So it's a huge and very indeed long-term impact of the Kakhovka catastrophe on the environment. We can move to the next slide. Of course, the Kakhovka catastrophe also influences the biodiversity in many respects. So many mammals, vertebrates, invertebrates, birds, and other species, fish, will be affected by the flooding and the disappearance of Kakhovka reservoir and habitats around it. But this slide, just for an example, illustrates what would happen for the birds. We enlisted a couple of species that would be most severely affected by the flooding and the loss of habitats. According to the calculations of Ukrainian scientists, some species would need at least 3 to 7 years to restore their populations. And for predators, for instance, it will probably be even a larger period of time, ranging from 5 to 10 years. Also, Ukraine is an important European and not only European migratory birds flyway. So again, with disappearance of habitats around Kakhovka, these flyways will necessarily change, and that would impact birds' survival during these flyways. We can move to the next slide. Another maybe less intuitive impact of Kakhovka is the nuclear safety consideration. So radionuclides from what is supposed to Chernobyl nuclear accident, but also from the industries close to Dnipro River, were buried in the sediment layer of Kakhovka reservoir for the past 70 years, and if we speak about Chernobyl, 3 decades. These sediments, after the disappearance of Kakhovka, after the explosion on Kakhovka Dam, were flushed out, resuspended, and carried downstreams toward the sea. These sediments were also redeposited in the estuarine marshes. They are also open to the natural forces such as wind and water, and may be redeposited further and travel further. So in this way, they will pollute and contaminate lands around. This, of course, also leads to the process called biomagnification, which basically means that plants around Kakhovka will absorb these radionuclides, and then the concentration will magnify as these radionuclides pass up the food chain. So that's another important consequence of the environmental consequence of the catastrophe in Kakhovka. We can move to the next slide. As promised, a couple of considerations regarding the applicable international law. So what law, the law of armed conflict in this particular case, says about the attacks like the one that we witnessed in Kakhovka? Such objects as dams, dukes, and also nuclear power plants are specially protected by the IHL regime. In particular, Article 56 of Additional Protocol 1, to which Ukraine and Russia are parties, of course, says that these objects should not be the objects of the attack. Even if these objects are used for other than their normal functions, for instance, when the party to the conflict put their forces or some military equipment on those objects, they can be still attacks. The attacks may happen only in the situation when the military necessity really requires such actions. And even in those cases, there is still the principle of proportionality, so-called, that prevents parties from going into attack that may cause severe damage to civilian objects. And the definition of civilian object includes, of course, environment. Next slide, please. This IHL framework translates to the international criminal law framework. And the episodes like Kakhovka may be characterized from different standpoints as different international crimes, starting with intentional destruction of civilian object, ending with what we think is more important and more appropriate here is the intentional launching of an attack that causes excessive, widespread, long-term, and severe damage to the natural environment in relation to the military advantage anticipated. This being said, next slide, please. There is, and that's one of the takeaways from my presentation, at least, that we still need, despite the capacity of the Rome Statute to capture the events like Kakhovka, there is still need to better protect the environment in the international criminal law, which means criminalization of the crime of ecocide. We think, and after doing our research on Kakhovka, we see that we need the characterization of the events like Kakhovka as crimes requires so much of legal gymnastics that the protection really is not as efficient and as vivid as it should be. So we think that ecocide criminalization will contribute to the prevention of the crimes like Kakhovka. And that's important because whatever we think about our future plans regarding green transition and net zero, we should also remember that with crimes, environmental crimes like the one that happened in Ukraine, all the progress of the humanity can be wiped out, can be just eliminated. So without proper protection, proper criminalization of acts against environment, we can't really move forward sustainably. I will conclude my presentation here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dmytro, for this really deep dive into the consequences for the nature and also legal consequences. And my pleasure is now to, after this long talk, invite the Ministry of Environment of Moldova, Ms. Iordanov, to have some closing statements, maybe reflect on how this situation and this catastrophes impacted Moldova and how will be the next steps and how we can have maybe takeaways from this.
Yeah, thank you for offering me the opportunity to close this event and also to make a short summary. First of all, indeed, it's very huge work which you done evaluating the situation of Zaporozhye nuclear power and also the situation with the Kakhovka dam. It is very important to have all the data collected, all the witnesses collected, all the videos and evaluation collected, and to react promptly, not to wait, but to act now, to act to the different international organization, to act to the court, to act to the prosecutor, and to start the investigation. Because in the environmental crimes, you already mentioned, but I would like to repeat, it's very important, the time frame, because sometimes it's very complicated after the years, months, to accumulate the data, because people are losing the information, the biomaterials could be lost, the water could be flow. So it's very, very important to keep everything in time, done correctly, and to be correctly evaluated and presented. So indeed, you've done a very great job in all this exercise, but it's not a moment to stop. Why I'm speaking that is not moment to stop, because we need to think about the next step and not to wait when the war will be finalized. For sure, the war will be finalized, and for sure, Ukrainian will win. but it's necessary to work now. And I know that quite a lot of scientific researchers, they don't have experience to work during the war. Usually they are coming in the countries after the war. So this is a unique situation when a lot of science, they need to act now. They need to learn how to do this during the war. And we need to elaborate the documents in a way that would be approved, trustful and confident. Regarding the Kakhovka, you know very well that this lake, first of all, had the main function to be used for the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. I will not enter into the details because I'm not specialist in the power plant, nuclear power plants. But I would like to mention that this reservoir, which had more than 13 kilometers, cubic meters, it's indeed was very huge. And one of the aim of this reservoir was for ensuring the water supply, also water for the irrigation, and also for the production. So in this way, after the explosion of the dam, all these possibilities was collapsed. They just disappeared. So we need to think also about the future. And the future means recovery. But before recovery, we need to think what kind of recovery we would like to have. First of all, our recommendation will be that the recovery should be green and very sustainable. And also, it's a very complex approach, how to decide what to be decided. And this is indeed additional research, additional issues which need to be discussed, calculated, and the arguments should be put it on the plate and discuss it not only from the political point of view, but also from the economical point of view. But the main issue is from the environmental and sustainability point of view, because we need to decide what we would like to have after that. But in the same time, we need to think additional to recovery. What kind of impact such kind of damage explosions will have for the entire area? And entire area, it's not means only Zaporozhye till the Black Sea, because entire area, it means also neighbors. Okay, we need to recognize and to underline that Kakhovka explosion didn't affect directly Moldova, because we are on the different hydrological basins. Kakhovka is on Dnieper, and we have Dniester, a totally different hydrological basins. But we have winds, we have animals, wildlife, we have migration of the plants and animals, and we for sure, and we are together members of the same basin, Black Sea basin. So the impact is not right now on Moldova, but the impact will be realized in several years. And the several years means also the impact on environmental impact on the area, because the semi-arid area could be created there. Because can you imagine that after the explosion, all 50 villages and towns, they just disappear? And okay, even if the buildings are survived, they are still there, but we should understand that the waste, landfill, all the products, the fuel infrastructure, the wastewater treatment infrastructure, it was destroyed. Or even if it was not destroyed, because I understood from the colleagues from Ukraine, it's still necessary to be conducting the entire evaluation of the consequences of such explosion and in very big detail, in very detailed. So to evaluate each element of infrastructure and how these elements of infrastructure affected the area, it is a huge work which should be continued to work. So I'm speaking now that in the time, the accumulated pollution, the accumulated destroy of the area or the protected areas or the forest will create a different ecosystem. and different ecosystem means in the Dnipro region, basin, Black Sea region, and also could affect other countries. So indeed, it is an issue which we need, first of all, now to act, not to stop, to continue the accumulation of the data, and to have this connection between the evaluation conducted. That's one, the scientific research, because it's very important at this moment to have this scientific research, how the impact will affect the life, the nature in the area, what kind of measures we need to take to recover the country, to recover the area. And also we need to think on the large scale, because we need to be prepared. And this is for the moment. And for Moldova, we taking in consideration that, first of all, we are on the border, this one. So we already have unpleasant examples when the bombs which was directed to Ukraine, they affected the Republic of Moldova. We also need to take in consideration that we also have the hydropower dams. So the risk is quite big. So we need to evaluate and to estimate the potential risk. We need to be prepared. We need to have the early warning system. We need to prepare people. So we need to prepare and to be ready to act in case of infrastructure damage. So this case of Kakhovka explosion on the dam bring a lot of question marks, a lot of topics for thinking, a lot of topics which we need to establish in our behavior and also in our policy documents, and to start working on this, because the period of peace made us more relaxed. Now we understand that it is also an issue which need to be taken in consideration, and also it's an issue which we need to develop and not to forget. So I would like on the last words of my intervention, first of all, to wish you power and confidence in what you are doing, to have support from international organization experts, and to have entire feeling of doing this, and be proud that you are doing correctly and you are doing in time, and for sure you will win, and the peace will come to Ukraine and in the region. Thank you for all your behavior and for all your courage.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Yordanov, for really underlining everything useful and everything important. So to wrap it up with one sentence, so we need to research, we need to collect, we need to analyze, we need to find the mistakes, find solutions to the mistakes. We need to cooperate also with our international partners, because you also have the power, you also have the knowledge, and only together we can make learnings and we can try at least to solve the problem altogether. Thank you so much for attending this discussion. So I also want to emphasize at the end the partners who were organizing it. So if you want to read more, you can approach the speakers, no more for the speakers afterwards, but the organizers were the Truth Hounds, NGO Eco Action, Greenpeace. Thanks also for the Moldovan Ministry of Environment. And I am a representative of the Ukrainian Climate Network. My name is Diana Pofalushi. And thanks also for the support of the Swiss Embassy in Ukraine. So invite you to the next event. We will be talking about agriculture. So thank you and keep in touch.